This sword appeared 2,000 years ago and changed the course of Chinese weapon history. Greetings all, welcome back to the Sword Lab. We have another sword from LK Chen here to look at. This one is very, very special. This is the version 2 of the Heavenly Horse Han Dynasty Cavalry Dao. As you can see, it has an interesting profile, which we will be getting into. As I said, this sword changed the trajectory of Chinese weaponry from that point forward. This sword is called the Heavenly Horse, and that is not an insignificant name. The Heavenly Horse actually refers to a specific type of horse called the Fergana horse. This horse was from the Fergana plains or valley in what was then Persia. Now I believe it is modern-day Uzbekistan. This civilization was a civilization within Persia, and the Han Dynasty traded with them in those times. That trading relationship turned into a war where the Chinese became victorious and essentially demanded horses for them to crossbreed, thus making their cavalry much more effective, faster, all of that. Before that, they were using the kind of common Central Asian, Mongolian type horse, which was strong and stalwart, and was great for chariots, which they were using before. But to mounted cavalry, these horses were ideal. They were so valuable because the Han Dynasty had been in conflict with a steppe people called the Xiongnu. The Xiongnu pretty much harassed the Han Dynasty for most of its early period. The Emperor Wu Di then decided, you know what, we're gonna nip this in the bud, and he started to research the cavalry and better ways to fight horseman to horseman. Importing the Fergana horse was one of those ways that he did it. The other way was developed this sword here. Now, the Han Dynasty had a stalwart cavalry through most of its history. They did use some chariots, but chariots kind of went out of use in the Warring States period before that. However, the cavalry was armed with ge, ji, which are kind of halberd type weapons, or they were outfitted with something more akin to this sword here. Now, this is a Han Dynasty straight sword, and while it gave you good reach and good penetration, especially because it is mostly a thrusting weapon, on horseback and against other riders, the cut is definitely something that you want to emphasize instead of that. The sword itself has interesting features. It's got a very, very short handle, as we have seen before in these types of weapons. It has the ring pommel. Now, these sabers in the Han Dynasty are the first appearance of the ring pommel saber. This is a style of saber that continues through every dynasty up until the 20th century with the Dao, which was used in a lot of conflicts, even in World War II. So, the ring pommel is significant. Now, if we look at the blade, we see this very pronounced curve. Right? Now, the edge is here. So this is a recurved blade. There's obviously many reasons why recurved blades have been used in history. They're used in many cultures on many different types of weapons. This is interesting because it is so long. This is a very long sword. The blade has a nice thick spine. So while it does not look like much, it looks very slender. It looks very grass-like, if you might say. It is actually a significant blade. So the blade profile that way is there. Now, the interesting thing is it is hollow ground down the entire length, and I'm not certain that that will show up on camera, but I will try to get some footage of it and splice it in. That hollow grind is historically accurate, but I have been told that the machinists have had a hard time reproducing the historical angles with modern machining tools. So that's something interesting to know. This is one of the first Dao that have existed in the Chinese arsenal. And from this point forward, the Dao reigns supreme as far as the sidearm of choice, all the way up through the Qing dynasty. So this is the start of an extremely long tradition, and an extremely important one developmentally for the martial arts that we practice today. That being said, this is nothing like the the crude chopper that the Dada was. This is a very finely designed, sophisticated piece of military technology. The recurve in there is very functional. It will facilitate more slicing, right, as it's dragged through, and especially if we're swinging it. Now, I have tested this a bit, and I have to say, the more that I use it, the more I like it. It is a little awkward at first. It is extremely forward balanced. I don't want to say tip heavy, even though that's probably how most people will interpret it. But for me, it almost feels like it wants to just pull itself into a cut, right? Meaning, I don't have to put a whole lot of energy into anything to get this thing moving, right? The one thing I do have to put a lot of energy into as I'm standing here is stopping it. Right? There's a lot of momentum that's coming through here. So I've noticed that as I have cut targets with it, follow-throughs that allow the saber to kind of go through here, I've kind of needed. Now, as I've cut with it, what I've tried to do, I'm not a fantastic cutter. I know there are some people out there, like Philip Martin, who can cut tatami mats with other tatami mats. That is not me. So what I'm looking at is what are the properties of the weapons that allow it to do this, and how easy is it to get it to do significant damage. With this sword, it is a little tricky at first to go through larger targets without getting stuck or whatever. One thing that I'm doing is I will basically just try to put a little energy into it and let the weapon kind of flow through the air using gravity as much as I can to go through the target. What I have found in this weapon is it cuts very, very well. Even when you're off, even when you do a failed cut, lose your whatever, it does significant damage. Okay, so it will either glide through, cutting deeper as you remove it. It will either take a little chunk out, but nothing much stops it. And if you were riding on a horse and this were to get stuck into something, it would more than likely, because of the recurve, be able to slide out. This is just supposition. I don't know. Now, also keep in mind, I am not a horseman. I have done all of this on foot. I have been in contact and hopefully we will be seeing this weapon in a bunch of other videos, and I hope to be collaborating with some people in other parts of the globe who do have horses available to them, and specifically horses without stirrups. This is important because this weapon was more than likely used without stirrups, meaning there's a limitation to how much leaning, how much maneuverability that horseman is going to have without, of course, falling off their mount. Hence the long length there and all that. So more information on those collaborations soon, but we should be seeing this weapon a lot. As far as the fit and finish of the LK Chen reproduction, obviously LK Chen has very quickly formed a reputation for excellent craftsmanship and historical accuracy. I don't think this is any exception to that rule. It is, in fact, a good sign that he is serious about the historical accuracy, because this is a modification to make it perhaps a little bit more like the average one of the day. Remember, when you get something that is 2,000 years old and you're examining it, there's a lot of corrosion, so there's probably a lot of mass that is lost over the years. So trying to discern what the actual weight is can be tricky. I believe this is based on a less corroded, more intact blade, and therefore it has a little bit better weight and balance. I cannot speak to that as I have not tried the other version. Ben Judkins will probably chime in on that front. Like I said, the sword is very strange at first. It is very long, and it kind of feels almost like a little bit of a hammer because everything is kind of centered up here, but not quite. It would be a very difficult weapon to fence with on foot, right? Because, well, there's a lot of it pulling you through cuts. On horseback, on the other hand, I could see this being an extremely viable weapon, and actually very fearsome, because being able to have that extra reach to get the other rider, while being assured that you will be doing grievous bodily harm to them, provided that you can circumvent their armor. Now, the handle here, and I will put it back in the scabbard, has these three lumps, which form a kind of grip. I am using this forward feature here as my hand stop. And for the size of my hand, that is really perfect. My hand is nice and sandwiched between the ring pommel and this little hand stop. If your hand's a little bit bigger, that's totally cool, because I do still have a little bit of play. I do have thin hands. However, I do have long fingers, and this handle is very comfortable, even though it is square. The ring pommel, of course, an historic addition. It provides a wonderful hand stop, and that is very, very useful with this weapon as you are kind of swinging it around if you're cutting in your backyard and that kind of thing. It's not something that I would have thought to check out or thought to get. This one is on loan to me for review purposes, but it will probably be making the rounds in some other videos as well. Not just mine, but other people's. So there it is, the Heavenly Horse Han Dao, version 2. This is more historically accurate. It's a historic weapon. It has historic features that begin a tradition of Chinese sword making that extend to present day. The Dao has become the ubiquitous weapon of the military, which we have talked about before. So this is the beginning of that journey right here. The Heavenly Horse is itself an iconic Chinese symbol. this sword being connected to the heavenly horse and that whole story is very fitting, not only historically, but thematically and traditionally. So, a very, very special sword, an extremely historic sword, often called the grandfather of all Dao. This is one of the weapons that began it. Anyway, go check it out on their site, lkchenswords.com. We will see you soon for more reviews and our experiments on to try to find out how they were actually used in real time. So, stay tuned for all of that. Thank you for tuning in. Go check them out, LK Chen Swords. We'll see you next time. Patience, practice, perseverance.